AOC called Pam Bondi an outdated lawyer living on lies right in the middle of a live congressional hearing. Then Bondi opened her weathered leather briefcase, revealing documents no one on the committee had ever seen before. But that was just the beginning of AOC's political nightmare. By the 40th minute, her closest aide stood up and declared, "She told me to alter the report to hide the money trail." You won't believe it when forensic evidence revealed AOC's encrypted emails went straight to a server in Beijing. The confrontation between Pam Bondi and AOC became the coldest, most brutal political takedown ever witnessed in the U.S. Congress. The congressional hearing room was packed. Dozens of cameras focused on two women sitting across from each other. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, young, confident, the face of the progressive wing, and Pam Bondi, former Florida Attorney General, known for her icy demeanor and ability to crush opponents with evidence. As soon as the committee chairman concluded his opening remarks, AOC leaned toward the microphone, her voice sharp as a blade. "Miss Bondi, throughout your career, you've defended corporations that pollute the planet. How do you feel knowing history will remember you as standing on the side of destruction?" Bondi looked up, her gaze calm. "I believe," she said slowly, "that history is written with facts, not slogans." The room stirred. AOC smirked, confidently firing back. Someone who represented an oil company talking about truth. That's rich. Bondi's expression didn't change. The irony, Congresswoman, is when someone calling for transparency hides their own funding sources. The words landed like a hammer. AOC hesitated briefly, then scoffed. "You're not in a position to question me. This is a hearing, not a trial." Bondi tilted her head slightly. "Then let's call it a trial of truth. And I brought evidence." The room held its breath. Bondi opened her brown leather folder, pulled out a few printed pages, and said in a steady, firm voice, "I have here a report from the Federal Election Commission, along with bank statements tied to the bill you sponsored. I believe the public has a right to know." A few reporters exchanged surprised glances. The committee chairman hesitated, then nodded to allow her to proceed. Bondi stepped to the podium, the camera lights illuminating her composed face. "If we're talking about climate justice," she said, "let's start by ensuring those advocating for it aren't profiting from it." AOC gripped her pen, her eyes flashing with defiance but staying silent. The air in the room grew heavy. You could hear the rustle of papers and the quickening of breaths. Within the first few minutes, the momentum had shifted. AOC realized she was no longer leading the hearing. She was being led. Those who came to see Pam Bondi humiliated were now witnessing something else. The absolute calm of a prosecutor accustomed to the scent of truth. The confrontation AOC had initiated was no longer a debate. It had become a public trial, and she, the one who thought she'd win, had just stepped into the defendant's seat. Pam Bondi didn't wait for the committee chairman to speak. She strode to the hearing podium, her voice even and cold. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present Exhibit 1, concerning the Future Now Political Action Fund, co-founded and directly managed by Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez." A large screen lit up behind her, displaying spreadsheets, financial diagrams, and a long list of transactions. Whispers spread through the room. Bondi flipped to the first page, her tone unchanged. According to the Federal Election Commission's report, this fund received 42 contributions, totaling over $8 million in the first 6 months of 2024. All were declared as domestic. But when cross-referenced with SWIFT codes and transaction origins, 12 of those contributions came from shell companies in London, Singapore, and Hong Kong, companies whose real owners are Chinese-backed energy conglomerates. AOC shot upright. "I object. This is misinformation. These funds were donated by Asian American individuals, completely legal." Bondi didn't look at AOC, just calmly turned to the next page. "I knew the Congresswoman would say that, so I had the Treasury Department verify. And here are the transaction codes provided by the Federal Financial Analysis Agency." She held up a printed sheet with a prominent red stamp. Codes 1A9, FZ 1A9, GQ and 1B3, JK all routed through ICBC, Hong Kong's International Commercial Bank. By law, any political action fund receiving foreign contributions, even indirectly, must report them within 30 days. Future Now did not. The room fell silent. Every camera turned to Bondi. Her voice wasn't loud, but each sentence cut through the air like a thin blade. What's more interesting, Bondi continued, is the timing of these funds. She pressed a button, and a timeline chart appeared.
April 17th,
2024, a $350,000 transfer into the fund's secondary account. April 18th, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez held a press conference announcing the draft of the Green Equality Act, and within 3 hours of that announcement, another $200,000 was deposited from the same bank. I call that a thought-provoking coincidence. Some committee members bowed their heads to review the documents in front of them, their faces showing confusion. AOC gripped her pen tightly, her voice sharp. Those statements don't have my signature. I'm not responsible for every transaction in the fund. Bondi turned, her gaze calm but razor sharp. But you are responsible for this. She projected an internal email onto the screen, the subject line clear, approval for disbursement.
AOC signature required.
At the bottom, the electronic signature, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, glowed brightly on a white background.
You didn't sign on paper.
But your electronic signature approved it. The encryption system, verified by Congress's own servers. Data doesn't lie, Congresswoman. Murmurs grew louder, like waves rolling across the room. The committee chairman leaned toward Bondi. Can you confirm the source of this document?
Bondi replied succinctly.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. It was legally obtained under a DOJ subpoena during last month's financial review. I'm only requesting permission to disclose the parts directly relevant to Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. AOC clenched her fists on the table, struggling to keep her voice steady. This is deliberate misrepresentation. There's no evidence I knew about any foreign sources. Bondi nodded slightly, as if expecting that response. Then let's talk about evidence of awareness. She pressed another button, revealing an internal memo with scribbled handwriting. Ensure international contributions pass through domestic shell accounts. Next to it was the fund manager's signature, with AOC at house.gov in the CC line. A long exhale came from the back row. Bondi closed the folder, her voice lowering. You can deny responsibility, but you can't deny the trail. Every transaction, every signature, every email leads to the same place. AOC interrupted, forcing a sardonic smile. I see you're good at storytelling. If you want to make accusations, at least bring legal evidence, not a performance. Bondi looked straight at her, her gaze unwavering. This isn't a performance, Congresswoman. These are financial reports verified by the U.S. government. And what concerns me isn't just where the money came from, but why it always appeared on the days you announced policies benefiting those donors. No one in the room spoke. A veteran committee member, a known AOC supporter, slowly removed his glasses, exhaling softly. The room was enveloped in a mix of shock and awe. Everyone understood. What Bondi had presented wasn't rumor or speculation, but a precise chain of data, down to the minute, down to the transaction code. Bondi closed her folder and stepped back to her seat, her voice light but firm. I believe those who call loudest for transparency should live the most transparently. And today, we have reason to examine that. The room fell silent. AOC sat motionless, the screen's light still casting onto her face, a face no longer brimming with confidence, but frozen with the realization that for the first time in her career, she was under the microscope of truth. Pam Bondi didn't let the room catch its breath. As soon as Exhibit 1 was set aside, she pulled out the next file, thicker, with a teal cover labeled Internal Audit, Green Equality Act. Her voice remained steady, cold, but sharp as steel. I present Exhibit 2, an internal audit report concerning the Green Equality Act, which Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez introduced and promoted as a revolution for environmental justice. Pages appeared on the large screen, showing a list of dozens of companies funded by the Green Budget Package. Bondi pointed to the right column, where several names repeated. According to the Federal Audit Office's report, of the first 18 approved businesses, 11 belong to the same political advisory network. This network, called the Horizon Group, is run by 3 former campaign aides of Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. The room erupted in murmurs. Some Democratic congressmen bowed their heads to review the report copies, while others exchanged silent glances. Bondi continued, unbroken. These companies have no experience in renewable energy. Their corporate filings were registered just weeks before the bill passed. Their stated business purpose strategic consulting, and political image management. AOC grabbed the microphone, her voice sharp. Those companies were involved in community outreach and education, an essential part of the Green Project. They are deliberately distorting this. Bondi turned, calmly replying, then why do all 11 of those communications companies share a single credit account opened with project funds? And why, in the August expenditure report, was nearly 60% of the budget marked as priority allocation for political allies? She pressed the remote. The screen displayed a handwritten note. Priority funding for political allies. Ensure loyalty before next quarter. The note was on official Green Project office letterhead, with the electronic signature Ocasio-Cortez below. The room's noise vanished, leaving only the hum of cameras. Bondi continued. This is the original, recovered from server records, verified by a digital forensics expert. Not a copy, not a forgery. She held up a sealed DOJ-labeled document. This is the authenticated signature. You can verify it anytime. AOC stood up. You're staging this. I didn't write that line. It's definitely forged. Bondi didn't flinch. Then I invite the Congresswoman to look at the metadata in the top right corner. File creation time, 10:14 a.m., June 17, 2024. IP address, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's office in the Cannon Building. A chill spread through the room. Bondi pressed on, her voice still calm but firmer. This bill was presented to the public as an effort to save the planet. But in reality, it saved a select group, carefully chosen political allies. They're the ones writing speeches, running social media campaigns, and funding re-election efforts. A committee member couldn't hold back, asking, "Are you saying this is a disguised political allocation system?" Bondi replied succinctly, "Exactly. A political tool disguised as environmental rhetoric." She flipped to the next chart, red arrows connecting company names to AOC's political advisory office, forming a closed network. The budget money loops around, from Congress, through shell companies, and back to the Congresswoman's political team, a self-sustaining, self-protecting system that claims moral superiority. AOC gripped the armrests of her chair, her voice strained. This is a deliberate fabrication to undermine my credibility and the movement. Bondi looked directly at her, her gaze steady. I'm not talking about the movement. I'm talking about actions. If the movement is built on lies, then truth is its cleansing. She pulled out another set of papers, a transcript of an internal meeting between the project management team and AOC's political advisors. The excerpt clearly stated, shift priority to a rising group. They handle media control. Below was the confirmation, approved AOC. Without raising her voice, Bondi concluded with a sentence that shook the room. They call it an environmental act, but when 80% of the budget flows to political advisors' pockets, it's no longer a green project. It's a power project. She closed the folder and stepped back to her seat. The screen's light still illuminated AOC's signature, gleaming like a knife carved into trust. No one on the committee spoke. In that moment, the room seemed to realize the environmental act AOC had proudly championed wasn't saving the atmosphere. It was cloaking the thick smoke of political ambition. Pam Bondi didn't pause for a second. As the documents from Exhibit 2 were collected, she stood again, her eyes like a beam slicing through the tense air. "Mr. Chairman," she said, "we've seen how domestic money operates. Now let's look at foreign sources. I present Exhibit 3, Foreign Affiliations and Political Influence in Environmental Policy." The large screen lit up, displaying 3 company logos, East Wind Energy, Green Tomorrow Foundation, and Pacific Renewables Ltd., familiar names from the Green Equality Act's donor list. Bondi spoke clearly, each word carrying the weight of a seasoned prosecutor. All 3 organizations are directly tied to Chinese state-owned energy conglomerates, and I have proof. She held up the first document, a red seal from the U.S. Energy Intelligence Agency prominent. East Wind Energy is a subsidiary of Sino Global Renewables, a company under China's Ministry of Resources. Green Tomorrow Foundation is registered in California, but its funding comes from the Beijing Environment Council, a state organization within Beijing's economic diplomacy network. And Pacific Renewables Limited is owned by a Chinese national, the vice chairman of China National Offshore Oil Corporation. Bondi paused, letting the room absorb the information. These organizations don't just fund renewable energy initiatives. They fund American politicians. And in the past 3 years, no one has received more contributions from them than Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. AOC leaped from her chair, her voice high and sharp. I've never taken a cent from any foreign government. You're slandering me. Bondi didn't turn. I didn't say you took it directly. I'm talking about the path of the money. She pointed to the screen, where a financial diagram appeared, red arrows tracing from Beijing to shell companies in Vancouver, then to the Future Now Fund in New York. Money has no nationality, but bank records do, and every one of these transactions left a trail. Some committee members bowed their heads to review the distributed documents. Bondi continued, here's what concerns me more. On October 12th last year, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez attended a closed-door conference called the Global Climate Leadership Forum in Geneva. According to the official schedule, it was funded by independent foundations, but State Department records show all travel, hotel, and security costs were covered by East Wind Energy. AOC interrupted, her voice shaky but defiant. That was an academic event, completely public. I didn't receive any personal benefits. Bondi nodded slightly, as if anticipating the response. Yes, so public, there's no video, no press, and no official announcement from the House office. But I have the conference summary. She held up a thin document stamped confidential in gray. This was obtained from European intelligence. In the closing remarks, the Congresswoman said, and I quote, "The future of global environment demands a reliable partner, and no nation is better equipped to lead the planet in clean energy than China." The room erupted in noise. Some congressmen whispered. Others frowned in disbelief. Bondi continued, still calm. I wasn't there, but those present documented it. And here's an email sent 2 days after the conference. On the screen, an email appeared from AOC at House.gov to Green Tomorrow Foundation. Subject, Commitment to Global Cooperation on Climate Equity. The first line read, "We stand ready to align our domestic efforts with China's renewable initiative for the greater good." No translation was needed. Everyone understood. Bondi clasped her hands behind her back, her eyes fixed on AOC. The phrase aligned domestic efforts with China's initiative. What do you make of it? Scientific cooperation or policy alignment? AOC raised her hand, speaking rapidly. That email is misquoted. I was talking about learning from battery production technology, not national policy. Bondi shook her head gently. Then why was this sent from the House office's secure server? And why was the recipient an organization directly tied to China's foreign ministry? She looked at the committee chairman. Mr. Chairman, I've provided the full original email chain to federal cybersecurity agencies, all verified authentic. No edits. A long silence followed. The air shifted from doubt to fear. Bondi closed the folder, her voice lower but firmer than ever. We're talking about potential interference in national policy, disguised as climate cooperation. When Chinese state energy conglomerates can fund a U.S. Congresswoman's political fund, and that Congresswoman pushes a bill enabling foreign companies to gain a foothold in America's renewable energy market. This is no longer about the environment. It's about sovereignty. AOC sat frozen. No objections came. Bondi gathered her folder, the ceiling lights reflecting off her glasses, glinting like steel. I believe, she said slowly, that protecting the planet cannot come at the cost of selling the nation's soul. A simple sentence, but it silenced the once noisy room. No one spoke further. Because everyone understood, this hearing had moved far beyond environmental debates. It had touched the fragile line between green ideals and the stark red reality of global power. Pam Bondi didn't wait for reactions. As whispers lingered after her foreign affiliations presentation, she opened the next folder, its black cover clearly labeled Lobby Network Structure, Confidential. Without preamble, she projected a complex diagram onto the screen, a web of arrows and symbols. Mr. Chairman, this is Exhibit 4, Bondi said, her voice cold and certain. It outlines a 7-layer indirect lobbying system operating under the guise of non-profit charities. This system is designed to evade oversight from the Federal Election Commission and the Financial Transparency Act of 1971. On the screen, the 7 layers were clear. The top layer consisted of public education funds, the middle of policy advisory groups, and the bottom of grassroots advocacy funds, all traced back to the Future Now Fund and Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's office. Bondi pointed to the fourth layer, labeled Civic Education Fund. This organization was established by Miss Ocasio-Cortez 3 years ago, registered as a nonprofit for civic education. But according to internal tax filings, 82% of its spending went to policy advocacy and political media funding, activities prohibited for nonprofits. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the row of congressmen. More specifically, this fund transferred hundreds of thousands of dollars to Justice Horizon, a Delaware-registered organization with no physical office. From there, the money was funneled through 2 more layers and ultimately reached the Congresswoman's campaign account, recorded as donations from private supporters. Bondi flipped to the next page. Here is the transaction log. Each transfer was approved by an individual, and that individual is the chief of staff of Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's House office, someone directly paid by federal funds. The sound of shifting chairs echoed, and a few congressmen exchanged glances. AOC clenched her fists, struggling to keep her voice steady. All fundraising activities were audited and compliant with the law. Those documents are being distorted. Bondi tilted her head, her voice still even. If so, please explain why a staff member on the House office payroll, specifically your financial aid, is named on the transfer receipts for the Civic Education Fund. And why were those receipts sent during work hours from a government server? She pressed the remote. The screen displayed a bank receipt, time-stamped 2:37 p.m. on November 2nd, with an IP address traced to Congress's internal network. Under federal law, Bondi said slowly, using government assets, personnel, or work hours for political purposes is considered a violation of the Hatch Act. If these funds are proven to be tied to campaign activities, we're talking about a crime of using public authority for personal gain, more serious than any financial violation. A heavy silence filled the room. Bondi continued flipping pages, her tone unchanged. This is the money flow diagram between the lobbying layers. The 7th layer, Community Uplift Initiative, was used to receive corporate donations, then legitimized through civic education programs. But internal reports show no training sessions ever took place. The entire sum, over $1.8 million, was funneled back to the 2nd layer, Justice Horizon, then directly to a secondary account of the Future Now Fund. She closed the folder, her eyes fixed on AOC. The Congresswoman once said her movement represents the common people, those without a voice. But what I see is a lobbying network more sophisticated than the corporations she condemns. Only it's cloaked in the slogan of equity instead of a corporate logo. AOC stood, her voice faltering. You don't understand. This is a legal advocacy model, encouraging civic participation. You're attacking the right to organize. Bondi didn't raise an eyebrow. The right to organize doesn't mean the right to launder money through nonprofits. She presented one final document, just 3 pages thick but marked with a DOJ evidence label. This is a sworn statement from a former House office employee who admitted being tasked with coordinating contributions from civic education funds for the re-election campaign. He provided copies of directive emails from the Congresswoman's political advisor, signed with a @mail.house.gov address. No one spoke further. Bondi gathered her documents, her voice low but clear. This is no longer about money or the environment. This is about a public official using public authority to nurture personal power. And in this legal system, that's not a mistake. It's a crime. The only sound was the cold hum of the cameras, like silent witnesses to a truth just laid bare. Pam Bondi closed Exhibit 4 and slowly opened the next file. This one had a silver-gray cover, embossed with the words Confidential Media Contract Agreement. The room's atmosphere grew thick again. The light from the cameras reflected off the table, making every breath feel exposed. Mr. Chairman, Bondi began. I present Exhibit 5, hidden contracts between Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's office and a self-proclaimed independent media company, Media Integrity Group. She pressed the remote. The screen displayed the first page of a contract, the U.S. seal titled Content Coordination and Messaging Agreement, signed between the House office of A. Ocasio-Cortez and Media Integrity Group, LLC. Bondi spoke, her voice steady, almost without inflection. This contract was signed on February 3, 2024, for an 18-month term valued at $2.7 million. The service provider was responsible, and I quote, for coordinating, overseeing, and ensuring digital content across platforms accurately reflects the Congresswoman's views. A small wave of murmurs arose. Bondi waited a few seconds for the room to settle, then continued. The notable part is in Appendix B, line 11, monthly payments to platform partners to ensure prioritized content visibility per approved messaging. I don't need to explain what that means. It's no longer independent media. It's information control. AOC stood, her voice higher than usual. I never signed any such contract. This document is surely forged or manipulated. Media Integrity Group was just a technical partner, handling environmental policy promotion. Bondi flipped to another page, calm as if every reaction was anticipated. Yes, Congresswoman, I knew you'd say that. That's why I brought the original contract, seized from Media Integrity Group's servers. She held up a transparent folder containing a printed document with a red DOJ seal. This is the contract, legally obtained under Federal Court Order 2025-347A, signed by a D.C. judge on April 19th. The document has been fully verified, including the electronic signature of Party A. That's your communications aide, Melissa Grant. Bondi projected the signature page of the appendix. The phrase "adjust algorithmic feed to favor approved narratives" stood out against the white background. Below it, the signature M. Grant and an electronic timestamp from the House office's internal network. The room erupted in chatter. One congressman whispered, "My God, this isn't just political advertising." Bondi continued, her voice lowering, "This isn't just an ethics violation. It's interference with public information using taxpayer money." The monthly payments were made through a government office, using Congress's media budget account. I have bank statements from the Treasury Department, all matching the posting schedule of the Congresswoman's Green Futures media campaign. AOC gripped the microphone, struggling to stay calm. Those expenditures were for policy promotion, completely legal. Bondi responded directly, her words hard as stone. Promoting policy doesn't mean paying to control display algorithms. Under the 2019 Freedom of Media Protection Act, any form of purchasing content prioritization for political gain is considered a violation of anti-information manipulation laws. This isn't promotion, it's manipulation. She pressed the remote, and the screen shifted to a timeline. Payment dates on the left, abnormal spikes in impressions and engagement rates on social media platforms on the right. Each time a payment was made, Bondi said, engagement tripled within 24 hours, accompanied by thousands of new accounts posting identical content. AOC, the voice of the planet. Digital forensics show over 60% of those were automated accounts created the same day. A sharp exhale came from the press row. Bondi concluded, when a House office signs a contract to coordinate content, spends public money to buy social media priority, and hires an outside firm to control information flow, that's not a media strategy. It's abuse of public media power. AOC tried to stay composed, but her face paled. She flipped through papers, managing only. I never directed that. Bondi didn't respond, only held up an internal meeting memo from Media Integrity Group with a note, all decisions cleared through congressional office, direct approval via AOC staff. Below the signature M. Grant, senior advisor. She closed the folder, her voice low but clear. This contract isn't just an administrative violation. It shows a congresswoman turning social media, a tool of freedom, into a personal propaganda machine. And when political power is combined with the ability to manipulate information, that's no longer democracy. It's control. Bondi returned to her seat, her hand resting lightly on the closed folder. In the dead silence, her final words echoed through the rows. Free speech cannot exist if truth is bought with contracts. No one spoke further. Even AOC's defenders understood. This wasn't an emotional accusation, but a legal bullet piercing the heart of power. Pam Bondi didn't leave the podium. As the murmurs from the media contract discussion lingered, she opened her small leather case and pulled out a silver recording device. The room fell instantly silent. Her voice dropped, resolute, like reading an indictment. "Mr. Chairman, I present Exhibit 6, a legally obtained audio recording, under a federal subpoena, of an internal meeting of Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's advisory team on May 9, 2024. Camera lights swung toward Bondi. She placed the device on the table and pressed play. A faint static hummed. Then a familiar male voice came through. "If we want to make the green equality campaign a phenomenon, we need to stage emergencies. No one cares about climate unless they're scared." A brief pause. Then AOC's voice, clear and decisive. "I agree. If we don't have real data, create equivalent data. What matters is emotion, not numbers." Gasps echoed. Reporters looked up from laptops. Cameramen paused. No one in the room dared move. Bondi stopped the device and lifted it. That, she said, was a conversation between Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez and her chief media advisor, Daniel Park. This was recorded during a closed meeting at campaign headquarters. The original has been verified for authenticity by the FBI. AOC stood, her voice breaking. No way, I never said that. This audio could be edited. Bondi turned, her gaze calm. Then I invite you to hear the next part. She pressed play again. Park's voice continued. We need a viral event, a protest, an emotionally charged video. AOC responded. Fine, pick a poor neighborhood. Say it's hit by pollution. I'll show up there. Go live. Emphasize this is a victim of the old system. Remember visuals first. Data can come later. Bondi stopped the tape. This recording is over 48 minutes long, she said. I played the opening to establish the content. In the rest, Mr. Park outlines a plan to create simulated media data, specifically hiring an ad firm to generate thousands of automated comments, mimicking public support for the bill, and the Congresswoman approved it. AOC tried to interrupt. You have no right to play a private recording without permission. Bondi responded immediately. The subpoena allows it. This meeting wasn't private. It took place at campaign headquarters, involving public funds and a tax-funded media campaign. The FBI verified your voice through audio recognition software. All data is legal. A committee member whispered. My God, she just admitted to faking data. Bondi turned, her voice sharp as a blade. We're no longer just talking about financial misconduct. This is reality manipulation, creating events and numbers to steer public opinion. When a congresswoman uses public funds to stage voter emotions, that's a betrayal of public trust. She held up a thin stack of papers, marked Evidence Supplement 6B. This is a meeting memo recovered from internal emails. It matches the recording's timestamp exactly. The phrase synthetic data simulations appears 3 times. That's the technical term for faking statistics, altering survey data to fit a political narrative. AOC, still trying to stay calm, her voice trembling. Those methods are just media strategies, not crimes. Bondi didn't smile, only replied softly, when media strategies include staging scenes, spreading false news, and buying algorithmic priority, it goes beyond politics. It becomes systematic deception. She turned to the committee. I note that in the 3rd segment of the recording, Advisor Park used the phrase, we must make the public believe the climate is in crisis, even if the data doesn't support it. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez responded, emotion shapes policy. We're just adjusting the storytelling. I will submit the full segment to the DOJ. The room fell into a heavy silence. The committee chairman, a Democrat, leaned back in his chair, his eyes sunken as he stared at the papers. No one spoke. The camera lights stayed on, illuminating Bondi's face, making her look more like a prosecutor in a courtroom than a witness. Finally, she said, her voice soft but clear, I don't care about ideology. I care about truth. And the truth is that Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez didn't just take money improperly. She created reality improperly. The chatter stopped. AOC sat silent, her hands gripping the table's edge, her eyes searching the void for an answer. But no words could salvage her. That recording had done what hours of debate. Couldn't it expose the core of an entire movement? That behind the rallying cries for the planet was a political machine, fueled by fake data, staged events, and manipulated public emotions. And in that room, no one doubted it anymore. Pam Bondi gently closed the recording device, leaving a silence heavy as gun smoke after a shot. She took a deep breath and flipped open a new file with a pale yellow cover, the top corner clearly marked, Housing Justice Fund, Bronx Project. Her voice remained steady but chillingly sharp, freezing the room. Mr. Chairman, I present Exhibit 7, the truth about the Housing Fund, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez called a gift to the poor people of the Bronx. The large screen lit up, showing a newly built complex with a massive banner, Green Homes for All. Bondi continued. This project was announced in March 2023, with the goal of building 1,000 affordable apartments for low-income residents. Total investment, $480 million, mostly from federal funds, the rest from the Future Now Fund, and private partners rallied by Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. She paused, glancing around the room. But what were the results? The audit report I have here, conducted by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, shows 80% of the apartments in the project never reached Bronx residents. They were sold to connected investors or leased under community investment schemes at triple the original price. A few congressmen sighed. Bondi flipped to the next page. These investors have one thing in common. All are on the donor list for Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's advocacy campaigns. A closed network, public money turned into private profit. AOC leaped from her chair, her voice sharp. That's a blatant distortion. Every contract followed federal regulations and was publicly approved. That project brought hope to hundreds of families. Bondi raised her head, her gaze like a knife. Hope? Asked the people forced to leave that very land. She held up a thin folder labeled Witness Testimonies, Bronx Residents. I have here the sworn statements of 23 households, collected under oath. These are people who once lived in the area cleared for green homes. The screen changed. An image of a black woman appeared, her voice trembling in a video. My name is Teresa Lopez. I lived here for 30 years. They came and said I'd get a new home. But after I signed to leave, they never called back. I work 3 jobs and still can't afford rent in the new place. Now my old home is a luxury condo. The room fell silent. Bondi played a second video. An older man in a worker's jacket speaking slowly and clearly. My son used to believe in her. AOC said she'd build homes for the poor. But where are the poor now? I only see fancy cars and strangers moving in. Bondi turned to AOC. These words don't come from political rivals. They come from the people you promised to protect. AOC gripped the table, trying to argue, I don't control housing distribution. The local government handles that. Bondi replied curtly. Congresswoman, please see Clause 7 in the partnership contract. Your office had the authority to confirm priority allocations for project participants. And here she held up a HUD-sealed document. Is the approval signed by you? The signature, date, and case code all match. You approved the list of bidding companies, 11 of which are run by your close donors. Oh my God, escaped from a reporter in the front row. Bondi continued, her voice stern and cold. We don't just see financial mismanagement, but a betrayal of public trust. You promised homes for the poor, but opened the door for speculators. You called it equity, but it's a political deal cloaked in morality. She presented another document, a report from the Federal Oversight Committee. After the project's completion, average rent in the area rose 67%, while 420 households were forcibly displaced. You once said, no one will be left behind. I ask, where are they now? AOC didn't respond. Her face stiffened, her eyes averted. Bondi pressed on, unrelenting. I also have a witness present today. She gestured, and a middle-aged woman stepped forward. The woman from the first video, Teresa Lopez. She clutched a paper, her voice trembling but clear. I just wanted my home. I believed in the promise, and I lost everything. The room sank into silence. Bondi nodded to the woman in thanks, then spoke slowly. Mr. Chairman, I didn't bring this witness to shame anyone. I brought her to remind us that politics cannot use kindness as a mask for greed. A congresswoman representing the poor cannot turn them into pawns in an investment game. She closed the folder, her voice low but firm. Exhibit 7 shows not only public funds misused but trust sold cheap. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez didn't betray her rivals. She betrayed the very community that put her in this position. No one clapped. No one spoke. Only Teresa quietly wiped her tears, while Bondi returned to her seat, the camera lights reflecting off her glasses like an affirmation. Justice, despite layers of political dust, could still see every footprint of those who forgot their promises to the people. Pam Bondi waited for the woman to leave the witness stand, then nodded lightly in thanks. As the door closed behind her, she opened a new file, white cover, with Educational Impact Fund, Internal Revenue Service Report, embossed in the corner. Her voice remained calm, but this time carried a colder edge. Mr. Chairman, I present Exhibit 8, the investigation results concerning the Educational Impact Fund, founded by Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez and frequently promoted as a scholarship program for disadvantaged youth in the Bronx. The large screen behind Bondi lit up, displaying the first page of a report from the U.S. Internal Revenue Service. Stark numbers filled the screen. 2023 budget, $2.4 million. Bondi spoke, each word clear. According to tax filings, the fund declared its purpose as providing scholarships and educational support for low-income youth. However, over 3 years of operation, from 2021 to 2024, no scholarship records were issued, no students received support, and no educational programs were actually implemented. The The room began to murmur. Bondi flipped to the next page. Instead, financial reports show that 90% of the fund's budget, over $2.10 million, was used for management fees and administrative operating costs. The person directly overseeing this was the fund's executive director, Gabriela Ocasio, the congresswoman's cousin. AOC shot upright, her voice sharp. Gabriela is a community activist. She ran a volunteer program and received no significant salary. Bondi held up a thin stack of papers, lightly flipping to the first page. I'm afraid that's not accurate. According to IRS W-2 statements, Gabriela Ocasio received a total of $480,000 over 2 years, including a special allowance for strategic media coordination. This salary is 4 times the legal limit for a manager of a 501c3 nonprofit. A collective gasp spread. Bondi kept her tone even, almost cold, and there's something even more noteworthy. Here is an internal email between Gabriela Ocasio and the Congresswoman's financial aide, dated July 14, 2023. Subject: Re-profit allocation after Q2 close. She pressed a button to project it. The screen displayed the text, clearly printed. Allocation percentages completed as agreed. 15% transferred to the secondary account, as directed by AOC. The rest used to maintain the office and legitimize expenses. Below was the electronic signature. Guy Ocasio, Director, Educational Impact Fund. The room fell utterly silent. Bondi let a few seconds pass before continuing. Ladies and gentlemen, the secondary accounts mentioned here is the campaign account for Bronx Forward, where Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez serves as honorary chair. This means money from the educational fund, tax-exempt money, was funneled back into a political fund. Under federal law, that's tax fraud and misuse of charitable funds. AOC gripped the microphone, her voice faltering. Those emails could be forged. I never issued such directives. Bondi turned, her gaze like a surgical blade. Then why does the House office server have a copy of the same email sent to your esa.gov address with a reply stating, received and approved? To proceed as planned, ... Several committee members bowed their heads to review the distributed documents, their faces growing stern. Bondi took a step forward, resting her hand on the podium's edge. The fund's tax records show $320,000 spent on online scholarship programs. Upon review, no such scholarship platform exists. No recipient data was found, and no confirmation exists of any student being contacted. All scholarship programs existed only on paper. She flipped to the next chart. Money flows from the Educational Impact Fund to Urban Reach LLC, a company listed as a training partner. Bondi said, Urban Reach LLC, registered in Delaware, has no employees and no actual operations. Its registered director, also Gabriela Ocasio. AOC stood frozen, her hands clenched on the table. Bondi continued, an independent audit shows the fund spent $1.8 million on educational partners over 3 years, with no evidence of any programs. I have here the testimony of a former scholarship consultant. She stated, and I quote, there were no students, no classes. We just wrote fake reports to show completion. The room was dead silent. The committee chairman bowed his head, exhaling deeply. Bondi closed the folder, but wasn't done. What's tragic is that Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez frequently used images of Bronx students in fundraising events for this fund. Those photos, I checked, were purchased from a commercial stock image database. A cold wave swept through the room. Bondi continued, her voice lower, heavier. People believed they were helping the next generation, but in reality, their money was funneled to campaign accounts. She called for kindness, then turned it into political capital. AOC sat still, her face pale. No more angry outbursts, no more rebuttals, only emptiness in her eyes. Bondi closed the folder and looked directly at the committee. Exhibit H proves that the Educational Impact Fund had no real impact, only a fabricated one. Legally, it's tax fraud. Morally, it's abuse of trust. And on both levels, the person most responsible is the one who signed to establish the fund. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She spoke her final sentence slowly, each word falling like a boulder. If those calling for social change begin by deceiving poor children, it's no longer a movement. It's a sin framed in slogans. No one in the room uttered a word. The cameras kept rolling, capturing Bondi, closing the folder with a decisive motion. The light reflected off the white cover, making the words Educational Impact Fund stand out against the dark background, like living proof of a stark truth. Even compassion, in the hands of power, can become a tool to betray those it claims to represent. Pam Bondi closed the white folder and pulled out a new one, matte black with a red label in the corner. Personal investments. Confidential. Her voice dropped, steady and cold. Mr. Chairman, I present Exhibit 9, concerning Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's personal investments, conducted through shell companies. She activated the screen behind her, displaying a financial diagram filled with red arrows. These companies, Aurora Impact Holdings, Progressive Equity LLC, Green Horizon Partners, were established between 2022 and 2024, coinciding with the Congresswoman's promotion of bills supporting renewable energy businesses. Their names sound environmental, but they are financial investment firms with no employees and no physical offices. Bondi held up the first sheet. This is a bank statement for Aurora Impact Holdings. On March 14, 2024, the company purchased 75,000 shares of Soltech Energy. 2 weeks later, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez announced the Clean Infrastructure Act, in which Soltech was the first company to receive tax subsidies. After the bill passed, Soltech's stock price rose 440%. The room was deathly silent. Bondi flipped to the next page. And this isn't the only coincidence. Over 3 years, companies linked to the Congresswoman conducted 17 major transactions. Each occurred just before or during her advocacy for a bill benefiting the related sector. I call these non-random coincidences. She projected a list. Progressive Equity LLC invested in EcoPort Logistics on May 27, 2022. A week later, the Congresswoman co-sponsored a tax exemption bill for green transportation businesses. Green Horizon Partners purchased bonds in Biofuture Chemicals in September 2023. 3 weeks later, the Congresswoman voted against a bill limiting biochemical subsidies. Aurora Impact Holdings invested in Blue Grid Solutions in January 2024. The following month, the Congresswoman introduced an amendment prioritizing energy storage projects. Blue Grid was chosen for the pilot. Bondi spoke slowly, each word clear. If this is random, then the laws of probability are dead. AOC stood, her voice sharp. I don't own shares in any company. Those records could be forged. Bondi responded calmly. According to the National Financial Registry, Aurora Impact Holdings was founded by Emily Cortez, but the social security number matches yours 100%, except for the first 2 digits. That's a common alias permutation technique to conceal the real owner. She pointed to the document. This company's bank account received 12 transfers from the Congresswoman's salary account, recorded as media operating fees. After each transfer, the company immediately purchased shares or bonds tied to bills the Congresswoman was promoting. This is a classic pattern of disguised insider trading. The room buzzed. Bondi held up a printed email from the digital records. From L. Harrison, Finance Coordinator, Office of AOC, to Aurora Holdings subject. Confirming transaction before bill announcement. We should complete the purchase before the committee release. Once the bill is public, stock will spike. Bondi nodded slightly. The DOJ verified it. No edits, no splicing. The email was sent from a congressional server 3 days before the bill's announcement. AOC protested, her voice trembling. I didn't know about those transactions. My staff may have acted beyond their authority. Bondi tilted her head, her gaze sharp as a blade. But every payment order was approved through your email account. The confirmation approved. Proceed. That's yours, Congresswoman. She continued. According to the Securities and Exchange Commission, these 3 companies' transactions show unusual concentration sectors. The Congresswoman directly legislates. An ordinary person invests for profit. A Congresswoman investing in sectors she's about to regulate. That's exploiting privileged information. A veteran committee member murmured. If a direct link is proven, this is a serious economic crime. Bondi nodded slightly. Exactly. And I have the final piece of evidence. She displayed the last slide, a timeline chart, each point marked by an arrow, investment date, aligned with legislative vote date. 17 arrows, perfectly matched. Bondi looked directly at AOC, her voice lowering. For 6 years, you've built an image as a champion of the working class. But in reality, you're speculating on the very laws you draft. This isn't just a conflict of interest. It's profiting from public power. AOC fell silent. Her face paled, her eyes fixed on her own documents. Bondi didn't stop. One of those investments, Green Horizon Partners, now holds a 3.2% stake in Northeast Energy Grid. Last year, when the Congresswoman voted against stricter regulations on energy contractors, that company's stock doubled. Those shares through the shell company are now worth over $6.8 million. A gasp spread through the room. The committee chairman bowed his head, sighing. Bondi closed the folder, speaking slowly but clearly. Exhibit 9 reveals a consistent pattern of behavior, using policy information for financial gain. This isn't just an ethical issue, it's an economic crime. She looked straight into the cameras, her voice cold and absolute. When those who write laws profit from the laws they write, justice ceases to be a principle. It becomes a commodity. And today, the seller is sitting in that chair. The room was silent. The lights shone on Pam Bondi's face, while across the table, AOC bowed her head, her hands clasped tightly. In the thick air of truth, everyone felt it. No ideal could shield the collapse of trust. Pam Bondi gently placed the thick folder on the table, her voice low but clear. Mr. Chairman, I present Exhibit 10, evidence from within Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's office. This document comes from a witness cooperating with the Department of Justice, a former senior aide who handled the Congresswoman's finances for 2 years. She opened the file. The first page boldly marked, DOJ Witness Cooperation, Verified Statement. The witness, Luis Herrera, was the senior operations advisor for Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's House office from 2021 to 2023. He signed a sworn affidavit, under oath to the DOJ, confirming that all financial decisions and money transfer directives came directly from the Congresswoman. Bondi held up the first sheet, reading clearly. I, Luis Herrera, acknowledge that I adjusted financial data under direct orders from Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. She told me to alter reports so no one could trace the money trail. The room's air seemed to vanish. AOC stood, her voice trembling. Herrera is a disgruntled employee. He's lying to secure immunity. Bondi replied coldly. He hasn't been granted immunity. He was given witness protection after providing verified documents. The DOJ confirmed the integrity of this affidavit. She projected a confirmation page with a red DOJ seal, alongside a photo of Herrera, captioned Cooperating Witness, Limited Immunity Agreement. The room was utterly silent. Bondi continued. In the appendix, Mr. Herrera describes 27 instances where he was instructed to adjust figures for advocacy funds. He wrote, whenever reports showed discrepancies, she told me to legitimize them by funneling money through secondary accounts. If anyone checked, say it was operating costs. AOC tried to counter. Those statements are spliced. I never said that. Bondi flipped to a new page, unfazed. This is a recording of the FBI's interview with Mr. Herrera. A male voice came through the speaker. I asked if we needed to report the secondary fund contributions accurately. She said, if we do that, everything collapses. Just fix it. Don't let anyone see the money trail. Bondi stopped the audio, speaking softly but sharply. The agency verified the voice. This is not fabricated. A committee member asked quietly, is there any corroborating evidence? Bondi nodded, opening the next slide. Yes, all emails between Mr. Herrera and the Congresswoman's accounting office matched the transactions I presented in Exhibit 9. All bear DOJ authentication seals. She looked at AOC, her voice calm but resolute. The witness stated that the Congresswoman personally reviewed every report, requesting changes before submission to the Election Commission. He wrote, I asked if it was legal, and she said, the law is something we can explain. The statement made several committee members wince. Bondi closed the folder, continuing, this isn't speculation. This is sworn testimony, verified by real data. Mr. Herrera had nothing left to lose, yet he chose to speak out. In his final handwritten note, he wrote, I once believed she fought for fairness, but I realized she was only fighting to cover her tracks. AOC sat silent. Her hands on the table trembled slightly. No one in the room looked at her. All eyes were on Bondi. She concluded, her voice slow and firm. Exhibit 10 shows clearly. This is no longer about mismanagement or subordinate errors. This is deliberate direction, issued by the Congresswoman herself. When an insider stands up and says, I was told to conceal, the truth moves beyond debate. The room fell into heavy silence. The screen's light still illuminated the red text. DOJ Witness Cooperation. Bondi gently closed the folder, her voice lowering. The person who wrote those false reports has stood up and confessed. Now there's nothing left to hide. AOC didn't respond. Her face was rigid, her eyes clouded. In the cold light of the hearing room, everyone understood. The final wall of defense, her own inner circle, had crumbled. Pam Bondi remained at the podium, her hands resting on a new file with a metallic blue cover, a red label in the corner. Digital evidence, encrypted communication. Her voice was low but sharp. Mr. Chairman, I present Exhibit 11, digital evidence obtained under a legal search warrant, including encrypted emails between Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez and an international donor, linked to a Chinese state-owned energy conglomerate. The room's atmosphere grew heavy as lead. Bondi opened the file, holding up the first page, stamped by the DOJ, evidence obtained under federal warrant, 2025-619B. This data, she said, was recovered from a secondary server in the House office. The emails were sent via the encrypted Proton Mail network and routed through a server in Beijing. The FBI's digital forensics team decrypted and verified them fully. She pressed a button, and the large screen lit up, displaying the first email from AOC at House. Gov encrypted alias to z.lu@greenfuturecn.com. Subject: Strategic Policy Coordination. Message: Cooperation must remain discreet. I'm prepared to push for policies friendlier to China, provided financial support. Commitments are secured. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Bondi spoke clearly, each word deliberate. The recipient, Mr. Zhao Lu, is the chairman of Green Future CN, a state-owned conglomerate under China's Ministry of Industry, and a primary donor to the Green Tomorrow Foundation, which the Congresswoman has praised as a global environmental partner. AOC stood, her voice urgent. This is fabricated. I never sent an email to that person. Bondi remained calm. We thought so until we found the email's PGP encryption signature, which matched your personal security key, stored on your congressional office computer. The digital fingerprint, 0xA3C5F22, uniquely identifies your device. She projected a network map showing connection points between Washington, D.C. and Beijing. These data packets passed through 5 intermediary servers before reaching their destination at China Telecom System. The transmission was verified through congressional internal network logs. There's no doubt about the origin. Bondi continued. In the second email, sent on June 22, 2024, the Congresswoman wrote, "We need to adjust our stance in international forums to avoid confrontation with Beijing. China must be seen as a partner, not an adversary." And just 7 days later, she voted against the bill sanctioning China's trade violations. AOC gripped the microphone. That was just academic discussion, not policy-related. Bondi tilted her head slightly, her voice even but cold. Academic. What about Zhao Lu's response? We will support you financially, with advisory and media, to ensure this stance is maintained in the U.S. Congress. No one spoke. Every camera lens focused on Bondi. She held up a confirmation from the Federal Cybersecurity Agency. All data was verified by 3 independent experts. Device identifier match rate, 99.97%. No edits or fabrication. A Democratic congressman who had supported AOC murmured, "If verified, this violates the Diplomatic Communications Act." Bondi nodded, "Exactly. Every congressperson is prohibited from discussing foreign policy with representatives of a foreign government without going through the Foreign Affairs Committee. Even if you call this climate cooperation, it's still a political influence agreement." She flipped another page, projecting a timeline chart. The transmission was established at 10:43 p.m. in Washington, the same time the Congresswoman's device connected to the office's secure Wi-Fi. The encrypted data took 0.84 seconds to receive a response from a Beijing IP. AOC sat silent, her lips tightly pressed. Bondi stepped closer to the microphone, her voice lower but resolute. "I'm not saying this is espionage. I'm saying this is covert cooperation with a foreign government entity." She closed the folder, then opened the final page. A DOJ analysis. Conclusion. The encrypted emails demonstrate coordination of foreign policy benefiting another nation. This conduct constitutes a violation of national security obligations and the honesty clause of the oath of office. The room was deathly silent. Bondi spoke slowly, each word like a driven nail. Exhibit 11 proves that Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez used a personal encrypted communication system to correspond with a foreign donor, advancing a political stance favorable to China. This is no longer about ethics or finance. It's about betraying national interests. She closed the folder, light reflecting off her glasses. When those in power write to entities beyond our borders to shape U.S. policy, that's not a mistake. It's betrayal. The entire room fell silent. The cameras kept rolling, capturing Bondi standing tall in the white light, while across the table, AOC bowed her head, her face drained of color. In that congressional chamber, everyone understood the hearing had crossed beyond politics. It had touched a realm of guilt no vote could redeem. Pam Bondi closed the silver folder, the sound of the cover snapping shut, echoing off the stone walls of the hearing room. The camera lights still blazed, illuminating AOC's face, pale, motionless as a statue. She could no longer speak. Her trembling fingers rested on the table's edge, her eyes staring at the documents before her without truly seeing. Her lawyer, a middle-aged man, leaned in, whispering something.
She stood,
His voice urgent.
Mr. Chairman,
We request a recess. My client needs time to prepare a formal response. The gavel struck, not from the chairman, but from Bondi's unwavering composure.
she didn't flinch.
Sir, your client has had 4 hours to respond, Bondi said slowly, her voice even and cold. But the people out there, the taxpayers who fund this system, have waited years to hear the truth. Today, they deserve to hear it to the end. The chairman hesitated, then nodded. The hearing continues. The room held its breath. Bondi adjusted the microphone, flipping through the final pages of her file. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, I request permission to conclude by summarizing the chain of violations we've seen this morning, not with emotion, but with facts. She spoke slowly, deliberately, as if reading an indictment for a nation. Exhibit 1, the Future Now Fund received money from foreign companies. Finances were concealed. Exhibit 2, the Green Equality Project, 11 benefiting companies all tied to a political advisory network. Exhibit 3, 3 major donors linked to Chinese state-owned energy conglomerates. Exhibit 4, a 7-layer lobbying system, turning nonprofits into political fundraising tools. Exhibit 5, a contract to control information flow, paying to manipulate media platforms. Exhibit 6, internal recordings, admitting to staging data and manipulating reality. Exhibit 7, the Bronx Housing Project, 80% of apartments went to connected investors. Exhibit 8, the Education Fund, no scholarships, no students, only money. Exhibit 9, covert investments, disguised insider trading. Exhibit 10, insider testimony, direct orders from the Congresswoman. Exhibit 11, encrypted emails with a Chinese donor, coordinating policy strategy. Each sentence landed like a hammer. No one in the room moved. Some Democratic congressmen bowed their heads. Republicans sat upright, eyes fixed on the woman speaking. The woman who had turned a seemingly political hearing into a moral audit of the nation. Bondi paused, taking a slight breath. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not here to convict, she said, her voice lowering. I'm here to clarify. Then she opened the final sheet, a summary verified by the DOJ. All evidence, financial, legal, technical, has been authenticated. Not rumors, not insider tips, not speculation. This is data collected by the U.S. government. And it all points to one person. AOC didn't look up. Her lawyer gripped the table, trying to keep her from leaving her seat. Bondi continued, her voice steady as steel. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez violated 3 fundamental domains. First, finance, accepting foreign funds, misusing public funds, profiting from policy. Second, ethics, abusing public power, manipulating media, betraying public trust. Third, national security, encrypted communications with a foreign government-linked entity, promoting their interests. She looked up, her gaze calm but piercing. When all 3 domains are breached, we're no longer talking about political errors. We're talking about betraying the democratic system. The statement drained the room of air. No more pens, no more chairs, no more breaths, only a thick silence. And in its center, Bondi's voice rang again, low, firm, like the gavel of judgment. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, this evidence has been sealed and submitted to the Department of Justice for a comprehensive federal investigation. I don't ask anyone to trust me. I ask you to trust the data, the signatures, the transmissions, the numbers that don't lie. The chairman looked around the room. Every member, from Republicans to Democrats, sat silent, then slowly nodded. He struck the gavel. The committee unanimously agrees to forward all exhibits to the DOJ for investigation. The gavel sounded again, a simple sound, heavier than any accusation. Bondi bowed her head slightly. She didn't smile, didn't show triumph. She simply gathered her files, which had upended an entire system. The lights illuminated her calm face. No smugness, no pride, just the certainty of someone who had done what was necessary. Across the table, AOC slumped in her chair. Her lips trembled. Her eyes stared into the void. Her lawyer placed a hand on her shoulder, but she no longer reacted. Pam Bondi turned, walking slowly from the podium. No one spoke. As the door closed behind her, the room remained still, as if everyone was trying to absorb that moment into history. She didn't need to shout, didn't need emotion. She had evidence, and the evidence spoke for itself. The lights in the hearing room dimmed, but the echoes of that morning reverberated across Washington. The next day, every major U.S. media outlet ran the headline, AOC officially under federal investigation. The earthquake Pam Bondi unleashed didn't just topple a prominent politician. It forced Congress to confront the darkness within its own system. Immediately, the House Speaker announced the formation of a special investigative committee on political integrity, with 8 members evenly split between parties. Under public pressure, Congress voted to grant Pam Bondi the role of independent oversight advisor, tasked with monitoring the federal investigation and ensuring absolute transparency. The nation was stunned. For the first time in decades, a civilian lawyer was entrusted by Congress with such a high position. That same day, the DOJ issued a statement. A federal criminal investigation into Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was launched, including charges of financial fraud, misuse of public funds, insider trading, and illegal communications with a foreign entity. Immediately, all bills sponsored by AOC, the Green Equality Act, Clean Infrastructure Bill, Housing Justice Fund, were suspended for funding reviews. AOC's Bronx office was sealed that night. Staff were questioned, many resigned. Close advisors withdrew to avoid implication. Political allies stated they respected the legal process, a diplomatic way to distance themselves from suspicion. TV shows that once celebrated AOC now replayed her exposure by Bondi. Audiences fell silent. An icon had fallen, and the nation saw it. While public opinion divided, Pam Bondi chose silence. She declined interviews, appearing only once before the committee to present her oversight plan. "We're not pursuing individuals," she said. "We're pursuing the mechanisms that allowed deception to thrive." That statement was quoted by the press, spreading across states. The left called her America's coldest figure, while citizens called her the only one telling the truth. The investigation expanded rapidly. The FBI issued warrants to seize AOC's digital servers. The IRS traced advocacy funds. The Ethics Committee questioned over 20 witnesses. Every detail Bondi presented in the hearing matched perfectly, from the Bronx housing project to the media contract, from stock transactions to encrypted emails. Every line, date, and signature aligned. The political fallout spread. Democrats faced a crisis of trust. A veteran congressman stated, "We can't demand justice while our own ranks are tainted." A new bill, the Transparency Reform Act, was proposed, requiring all Congress members to disclose financial investments and banning shell companies. Conservatives immediately supported it, and the public saw it as a victory for citizens. Major media, once AOC's allies, shifted. Editors apologized for overlooking warning signs. The event was seen as a turning point, forcing American journalism to admit public trust had been eroded by their own hands. One late-month morning, the special committee met privately at Capitol Hill. Pam Bondi, in a simple gray suit, presented her independent investigation plan. No theatrics, no flourish. She said only, "This crisis doesn't end with one person's conviction. It ends when the system is strong enough that no one can repeat this mistake." The chairman nodded, then struck the gavel. "Miss Bondi will officially coordinate Congress's entire independent oversight process." Outside, reporters crowded. One asked, "Do you feel you've won?" Bondi only smiled. "No one wins when a nation loses trust. I just helped it find its way back." The statement went viral, shared millions of times. Even her critics admitted she didn't need political victory, for she had achieved a deeper triumph, restoring public faith in justice. In the following weeks, the investigation expanded to other areas. Several high-profile figures resigned. New transparency regulations passed. The press called it the Purge era, not just because one congresswoman fell, but because Congress began to examine itself. Pam Bondi made no further statements. She quietly left the Capitol one late afternoon, carrying her final folder. The sunlight reflected off the glass doors, fading her silhouette, leaving only the echo of a simple principle. Justice doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to the truth. And in that moment, everyone understood. Bondi's victory was no longer personal. It was the start of a reckoning America had long awaited. 6 months after that seismic hearing, the U.S. Capitol stayed lit through the night. The Special Investigative Committee released its final report, over 1,200 pages, compiling all financial, technical, and testimonial evidence Pam Bondi had presented. The opening lines silenced the nation. All actions described in independent counsel, Pam Bondi's exhibits are confirmed as factual, deliberate, systematic, and directly ordered by Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The news spread in minutes. The federal courthouse in Manhattan blazed with media lights. The DOJ formally announced charges: federal financial fraud, misuse of public funds, falsifying records, and colluding with a foreign entity to influence national policy. That same day, the House Ethics Committee voted to strip AOC of her seat. A political icon fell in 10 lines of text. Those who once cheered her on social media went silent. Newspapers that had hailed her as the face of the future reprinted images of her leaving the courthouse in a gray coat, face pale, clutching a briefcase as if grasping the last shred of dignity. The preliminary sentence was announced: 20 years in federal prison, a lifetime ban from public office. AOC didn't cry, only looked into the cameras and said one sentence: "I once believed I was doing the right thing." The words rang like a farewell to an era of slogans. As America reeled, Pam Bondi stayed off television. No press conferences, no statements. She sent a brief note to the media: "My work is done. Truth doesn't need a defender, only someone to let it be heard." Then she returned to Florida, to her small home by Tampa Bay, where she'd lived before stepping into the political storm. Reporters sought her out, but received only a message from her assistant: "She's not commenting. She's at home, gardening." In that silence, her name echoed louder than any speech. Bondi's report, 11 exhibits, 2,700 pages, was archived by the Library of Congress and officially recognized as the U.S. political ethics precedent. On the cover of the archived copy, a brief note was added by the Oversight Committee: "When power strays, justice finds its way back, not with shouts, but with files, signatures, and the cold silence of evidence." Law schools began using the Bondi Ocasio-Cortez case as mandatory coursework in public ethics. Experts called it the quiet reformation, when a single hearing catalyzed sweeping legal reforms: bans on undisclosed congressional funds, mandatory annual audits, and new media transparency rules. A year later, at Harvard Law's commencement, the dean mentioned Pam Bondi. She didn't shout for justice. She wrote it with evidence. The audience fell silent, then stood to applaud, not for one woman's victory, but because they knew history had marked a milestone where truth outshone politics. In the Bronx, the Land from the Green Homes for All project was relaunched with transparent public funding. A small bronze plaque was placed at the gate for those who were forgotten and for those who dared to speak the truth. On social media, people shared Bondi's final hearing words: "Freedom doesn't need heroes, only those unafraid of facts." In the quiet, her return to Florida became a symbol of modern justice. No fanfare, no glory, just persistence and faith that the law still mattered. Months later, when reporters tried to interview her, Bondi replied only by letter: "I don't want to be remembered for taking anyone down. I want to be remembered as someone who helped truth stand tall." The letter ended with a handwritten line: "Justice, if it must have a sound, should be the rustle of pages, not the roar of shouts." That line was etched on the glass wall of the National Judicial History Museum, below the inscription, "Pam Bondi, the woman who made truth a tool for reform." In the years that followed, the case was remembered as an ethical milestone. No one debated Bondi's party or affiliations. She transcended politics. And the irony was, her silence spoke louder than any congressional oration. In Florida, each morning, Pam Bondi walked her dog along the bay. When recognized, she only smiled lightly and moved on. No flowers, no titles needed. She knew she'd done what every prosecutor dreams of, letting justice speak through its own evidence. The story ended without glory, without cheers. Only sealed files, signatures under dim lights, and a haunting silence, the kind that comes when truth is finally acknowledged. Pam Bondi didn't need to declare victory. The truth did that for her. And somewhere in America's memory, people recalled that morning when justice didn't arrive with trumpets, but with the cold rustle of pages, affirming that, in this nation, truth still has a voice. The story of Pam Bondi and AOC was not just one person's tragedy, but a mirror reflecting the dark side of political power. From Exhibit 1 to Exhibit 11, each piece of evidence, from the Future Now Fund, receiving money through shell companies, handwritten notes on priority allocation for allies, to encrypted emails sent to a Beijing server, exposed how ideals can be twisted into tools of self-interest. The most chilling part wasn't the money or the charges, but the calculated precision, fabricating data, Exhibit 6, altering financial reports, Exhibit 10, and hiding it all with sophisticated technical systems, Exhibit 11. When AOC sat silently in the hearing room, and Bondi said only, "I don't ask anyone to trust me, only the data," that was the moment justice reclaimed its voice. The lesson for Americans is to trust the process, not icons. A politician may be eloquent, beloved, but transparency must be measured by facts, not promises. For leaders, this story reminds them that ethics lie not in slogans, but in how they wield power when no one's watching. Every ideal must be tested by systems, not blind faith. When Bondi closed her files and left Washington in silence, she left behind a simple truth. Justice doesn't triumph with emotion, but with files, signatures, and the cold silence of truth. Thank you for following this story to its end, where truth was revealed, not with shouts, but with undeniable evidence. Please subscribe to the channel to join us in exploring more stories where justice speaks, and we'll see you in the next video.